Sorry. Look forward to that one again.
We never. This are you saying this? That. If I do get asked, I probably will now say it. You know what? the seed in my mind.
Well, you'll get away with it. I can't really. This man, you can. That sounds a bit. Does it?
That sounds a bit.
Yeah.
You know, I put it in an email as well.
Well, Ibrahim did the other night. He doesn't. Everyone's doing it.
Now I realise it's right. It's going to be impossible to resist that. So. Yeah. Very exciting. Yeah, well, I can't.
What's a step on my medical? Really, I have nothing.
Do subsections of all.
I think
Do quite a lot.
So I got home and then cleaned it up properly and realised that all I got was nuts.
It's so interesting. It tells you why. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't checked this.
This morning I had to stop off and say,
People on.
this has got very wrong. Don't talk to your money. I had to step on.
Yeah. Mark, 2 chairs, mate.
You always feel very low when you sit here, don't you? You're like, I'm like,
But they're not the
I'm like,
worst.
where's
That was the
my
first time
knees?
that's happened.
Like,
Some chairs are worse than others.
They're terrible, but they're not the worst.
I just end up like sitting on my legs, like, because it's not, because it's about, yeah, it's all about like what's the prime position, being low, you know.
So like you said, the chairs really just changed. There are some that are literally
Oh, I'm just gonna stick with
These chairs do nothing more than that.
But it would be, yeah, I just thought, because you're so used to just like up yourself, it's quite like,
Okay, yeah.
evening, how are you doing? I'm just too tired, James. Too tired. I haven't got a clue if I'm coming or going. I haven't got a clue if I'm coming or going. What? I'm feeling the work on meetings, so I don't know what, or just turn it off and not watch. Fight with South West Road.
I work in Mayfair.
We just find a central London location.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, to the Finance and Corporate Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I will take item 1 of the agenda. Unfortunately, due to the nearness of the last meeting, we don't actually have our minutes to sign off. However, I'm being given an undertaking that those will come to me in 7 days, be agreed, and then I will make sure that they are circulated to all members of the committee, and we can only apologise for that. Item number 2, declaration of interest. Does anybody have an interest they need to declare? So we will move on to the substantive agenda. So if we have item number 3, which is the report of grants, which I think is as it is, so I propose that we go straight into questions on that. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to raise? Councillor Gibbons.
Just on the reference numbering of each of the applications, it appears to be non-sequential. I was not clear why we go from 13 to 16, for example, then 16 to 19 on that. Is that because there were other bids which were not included on that table?
These were the ones that were recommended.
Okay, so the ones that are missing are the ones that weren't recommended. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it would be useful to see what didn't get through. And as a kind of follow-up from that, I'm just interested in how, as a ward councillor, for example, Brady hasn't got anything in there. One, how I would know what arts organisations might be eligible to apply, and secondly, how would I go about encouraging them to apply?
As Chairman of Grants, I can actually answer that question myself. We did have a lengthy discussion about geographical splits. Some of it, as in Putney, was because they're well provisioned anyway. So we made a commitment that officers would circulate those to all members of the committee, so that we could each and every do our part to encourage things. But we did actually discuss that, Councillor Gibbons.
I'm done, don't worry.
Councillor Gray and then Councillor.
Well, I was going to make 2 points. One was that obviously there were opposition councillors present at the subcommittee, so we shouldn't try and second guess the subcommittee too much, given that we're both representing then contradicting myself, I'd also like to ask on behalf of a friend why reference item 13 says Fairfield TBC. We're not quite sure where this is actually going to be yet.
Occasionally, sometimes you will have ones and it's quite difficult to work out which ward it actually falls in, but I'm sure that somebody can facilitate that exact answer for you, Councillor Graham. And to pick up your point, yes, you're quite right, we take a great deal of time going through each and every one of the grants, and it is a lovely committee to be on because everything is agreed unanimously, and we have not once yet in my 4.5 years had to go to a vote, so it is properly done, I can assure you. Councillor Canova.
Let's try that here.
Thank you. Coming from a charity background myself, I'm aware of the level of funding being fairly low, really. So I want to know if Wandsworth is or is working towards becoming a living wage friendly funder, and if not, why not?
Sorry, this has got to do with the grants paper?
Yes, the grants given.
Okay. Ms. Skinner, would you like to answer that one? I mean, we don't actually pay for wage rolls, so I'm slightly thrown.
So absolutely. So in the main, the grants are going towards projects or programmes, activities, not to wages of staff. And I think it is very rare, very, very rare that they actually do that. They're particular programmes.
Okay, thank you. Some grant givers.
Do we have any other questions?
We can't fund wage staff.
So we are minded, I mean this is effectively for information only, are we happy?
Agreed.
So item number 4, we have top line indicators. If I may, shall I go through these page by page, and do please catch my eye if you would like to raise anything. Page 11.
What? 3?
Top. So page.
Top line indicators, page 11. Are you? Oh yes, you're one.
Which is page 3 of the report. Yes.
So it will be the first page of the actual indicators.
Page 3 of 11.
Page 3 of 11.
Are you all there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Usually the page ones on the bottom.
I've only got.
If you,
The page numbers are on the right, at the very right of the.
So
You
19,
can see because there's 2 different page numbers and it depends which one you look at.
yes.
Oh, you're on it now.
We're on it now, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Marvellous.
take us 3 and count us 6.
Page. So the first one, page 11 on mine. You know where I mean by that. Page 12. The next page. Oh, I've got 2. So should we have? We'll do Councillor Zalier and then Councillor Wintle.
Thank you. On page 12, I had a question about the telephone service level. Was that yours as well?
Yeah, you just do it.
Well, no, but perhaps if you both contribute on this, that would be fine.
It was basically, I just wanted to know why it was still declining, and I mean, I see the parking issues are still going. I just wanted an update on what was happening, basically.
Councillor Wintle, would you like to add to that? Then,
It's exactly the same, just we hear a lot about the difficulty people have getting through on the telephones, and it's been read for a while. What's happening needs to go up. Same point.
So I think as it says in the explanations there, we have had some staffing issues. We've had a number of our experienced contact centre advisors leave. The recruitment in the early of the new year has been successful, so now we've got quite a few new people that are being trained up. So we do, as we say in the commentary, expect that to improve. The issue in parking has very much reduced, which has also meant that there are fewer calls associated with that. And the time taken to resolve those issues is also reducing, which means that then we can get a higher throughput. So we do anticipate that this is improving on a week-by-week basis. And moving forward, there's also additional IT systems that we are currently about to award. which will also mean that there is greater efficiency in terms of the scripting that we can use. So again, that will speed up the resolution of the call timing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When will this next come back to committee? Yeah. Okay, so hopefully I think we can all agree that we would like to see June. Yeah, we would like to see something better then. So we have got page 13. Councillor Gibbons.
The number of startups there is, I'm surprised that Brexit isn't mentioned as a factor in the decrease in figure there for startups. I mean, there's an indirect reference to inward migration, but surely we must be reflecting uncertainty about Brexit specifically.
Councillor Byrne.
I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that Brexit is a reason for an impact on the number of startups or otherwise. I don't think there's the evidence base to justify it as a comment. I mean, clearly it's one of our key indicators and one we want to improve. And we've actually just recently relaunched the Startup Loan Finance Scheme 2 weeks ago, which we think will be an initiative that will really should help those interested in starting businesses in Wandsworth. So it's something we want to work on, and we want this indicator going in the right direction. But at this point, there's no reason to suggest necessarily that this is down to Brexit, other than as stated here.
Councillor Daly and then Councillor Graham.
Thank you. In the explanation on the right there, it talks about changes to taxation, incentives for self-employment status, and I mean, for me, those don't ring true. But I think it would be useful when we're looking at something like this, which is quite abstract, if we could have it in the context of the national picture. So if there has been a 14% fall nationally, we're able to see that we're kind of matching that. Whereas all it tells us here is that it's fallen sharply and we don't rank very well amongst boroughs as a whole. But I'm not sure whether that is deteriorating relative to the overall picture.
I mean, that's a fair comment. I think one of the issues is, and Mr. Diamond, do correct me if I'm wrong, this is one of these things where it's very difficult to get up-to-date and accurate figures comparatively across London and nationally. So, if we are able to make a meaningful comparison, yeah, that might be useful to do. But I understand that's one of the ones that's trickier to do. But
it is. We purchase this data, and it's based on business bank accounts. So it's obviously a proxy for what's going on. But we can certainly try and compare it with the national trends to see where we are, because they can probably provide that.
It's quite important, isn't it? Otherwise, it doesn't really tell us anything.
Yeah, we can ask the company that provides that to give us that.
Yeah, flesh it out. Councillor Graham, and then
I think that what this is really showing is that business bank accounts are not a terribly good proxy for actual startups, because they can just relate to self-employment, and self-employment is affected by tax treatment thereby, and there is a government clampdown on people using personal service companies to avoid having to have
you make an excellent point, because as a number of the businesses at the launch event testified, that the banks are actually not doing a great job at making finance available to startups, because a lot of their processes focus on your personal financial situation in the first place, and that's why you're seeing increasing use of alternative funding, whether it's the likes of Funding Circle and other sort of online options. So Councillor Graham may well be right that it's not as good a proxy as maybe it once was, if it ever was good. But we're trying to find something that at least we can track and have an indication as to what's happening locally, at the same time as introducing new initiatives to boost it where we can, and hopefully we'll see the yield from the startup loan programme.
I was really just going to echo that. It's quite well accepted that commercial banks are not lending commercially in the way that they used to before 2008. and that's just it's accelerated quite dramatically in the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, a lot of alternative investment firms or hedge funds, to those who don't like them, are funding companies directly as well. So there's a big change going on, and I wouldn't use banking startups anymore as an indicator, and we need to find something else. Particularly for what is likely to be a more sophisticated world in Wandsworth than, say, other parts of the country.
Yeah, no, these are all decent comments. We'll look into that now.
Yeah, Mr. Diamond, I think we know why we want the data, so if we can find data that will give us a bit of guidance to see what the trends are. So if we can now turn to page 14, Councillor Salier, I think.
Yes, I do. Mine is on work match, this the first one, sorry. It was a question on why is the target, it looks like it's reducing what the target is, or is that the value? But also I wanted to understand what it sort of says the reporting cycle means that you can't really see what the outcomes are, and so there's always a lag in the data, and I just wanted to understand why we've made a target that we don't seem to have the data recording capacity to kind of use in any meaningful way, and is there a way around that?
Mr. Diamond, I think it's pretty much a similar sort of question. You know, we need the right data.
Okay, well, we do have the data. I mean, this is obviously data that we have, which is management information from Workmatch. It's just to confirm that the target is 400. That's the capacity of the team to take clients on.
Okay,
and,
not 300.
It's really the way we do it is to ensure their proper engagement, which is usually registering with Workmatch and then 2 sessions, so sort of diagnostic session then an advisory session. So it's a fairly high bar for making sure that someone is actually becoming a client, but that does have, that's what causes this data lag, so we need to collect that information and also to register it.
Right.
So perhaps we can be the ways around this to be a bit clearer on the target, obviously, and how well we're doing towards that. It's also one that doesn't actually follow a straight line, which is implied here. I think that the target of 300 will be the straight line over the quarters, and we usually have a big campaign in the new year. We've just had a construction jobs fair, for example, so that will bring in an awful lot more clients as well. So
but you wouldn't then add them until they'd had those 3 meetings.
Exactly.
So
yes.
you could have people in the pipeline.
So that yes,
At
we
the moment
work
there
on a
are
pipeline
people.
basis. So I think in terms of the red rating, we're confident that will
We'll move that.
that we would hit the target for this year.
Okay.
It's actually that lagging collection,
Okay.
data collection, which is causing the figure you see there.
All right, understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? Page 15.
15, yes, I have on the FOIs. I'd like to know if those numbers also include subject access requests, or are they collected separately? And secondly, although the number is lower, are the number of FOIs changed, gone up, gone sideways? I don't know who's gone down.
So those numbers don't include subject access requests. They are separate. It's a much lower number. We can provide that if people, the committee would like to know just the number it is. I don't know off the top of my head. The number of FOIs itself is increasing. So over the last 2 years, from 15-16 to 18-19 to what we anticipate being the final number, there'll have been an increase in 15%. Sorry, was that your final question?
To which there's another question essentially, which is, and it may be difficult for you to answer this question, but how many of them are just laziness on the part of the questioner who could have looked up the information themselves?
So I can't give a view on exactly what that is. What we do try to do, for sure, is try to minimise the number of FOIs coming in through the door by putting information onto the website and trying as best we can to make sure that information is easy to find. We will have a new system for operating freedom of information requests in the next few months. That will enable us to interrogate the information in a much better way. So then we'll be able to identify sort of through keywords or trends, and then we can start really populating against those words, trends, themes, services, much better information and highlighting it. So we can't do that currently because we're operating off an access database, but I anticipate that we'll be able to do that later this year.
Thank you.
Councillor Winter?
Obviously, we are only at 64.8% in 20 days. Do you have how many are they going above 20 days? Is it a little bit of slippage, or is it a lot of slippage?
I resist making it up. I think I think for the most part there are some. There's a small number which are very, very sort of fiddly, but quite a few. I think they just go over by a few days. It's just the volume of work, and as it says in the commentary. Similarly, in this team, we've had a few people leave, so we've had a bit of a backlog. I can confirm the backlog is now cleared. So I anticipate that will very much improve, and we've got a turnaround now so that when an FOI comes in to the council, that it's out to the service within 2 days and often 1 day.
Nice. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we've done with page 15, page 16, 17, 18, and 19. Councillor Gibbons.
The housing benefit overpayments. There's some. First of all, I suppose that one of the questions is to what extent is this connected with the rollout of universal credit and other benefit changes that the government has brought in, and we kind of can almost flip back and talk about a couple of other things about the claimant count as well. But it does seem a matter of concern that there's a large increase in overpayments, perhaps because of the systems that people are being asked to use to record the way in which the amount of work they do, particularly if they're in work, and the fact that work may be irregular and unstable. So I guess first of all, is to what extent is this a function of the universal credit rollout, but also, we've got this big increase in overpayments. Is there any way we can get a handle on trying to bring that figure down?
Mr. Russell.
Thank you. So the key factor in this is a system called real-time information from HMRC. So all of any electronic payroll in the country, they give their data every week to HMRC. They then match that up with housing benefit claimants, and if there's any discrepancies, they'll send us a list of people who appear to be earning more than they declared and that kind of thing. So we're then required to suspend those claims and create that overpayment immediately. So since that's come in over the last couple of years, the volume of overpayments we're discovering has just gone up, not exponentially, but by about 33%, we think. So there's nothing we can do about that. It's not related to universal credit as such, because these are housing benefit overpayments. What you might find as universal credit comes in, I don't know yet, is that there are some people who have overpayments on housing benefit, and we can't then immediately attach, if we're recovering from the housing benefit, we can't immediately attach that to the universal credit claim, so that could leave us with a larger amount. On the other side, we've employed additional staff and we are collecting significantly more cash than we have done in previous years as well. So we're trying to keep up with it, but actually, it's just the sheer volume of information coming through from HMRC that has led to this increase.
And to make it clear, this is talking about overpayment. This is most definitely not about underpayment.
No,
this is about overpayment.
Sorry, guys. Generally, it happens where someone has had a pay rise or something like that, and they have every change of circumstance on every housing benefit claim, they're supposed to notify us. So there's about 20,000 claims, and so it's a huge number of changes in year. As Councillor Gibbons points out, people with irregular earnings have to tell us every single time, and it gets very messy. And that's why sometimes you can get out of kilter and these overpayments are created. So
would it be fair to say that there's not, although it's a problem for us, we're not in a position to do anything about it?
Well, we can't stop, if you like, the total value of the overpayments increasing, because they're just happening through outside factors. What we have tried to do is actually collect more of them, so we've got additional resources in, and we're having, as I say, increased the cash we've collected.
And I think, as this is a top-line indicator, this will again come back to us so that we can track it to see what is happening. That's given to me. Want to add anything to it?
That's it.
Happy, thank you. Lovely. So all of that was for information. We're agreed, happy with that one. Then we will move on to item number 5, which is the modern slavery paper. Perhaps, Mr. Evans, you give us a quick overview as to why this is here? Quick.
Thank you, Chair. We'll be quick. So hopefully the paper is very self-explanatory. The Modern Slavery Act 2015 requires organisations of a certain turnover to produce a statement which really focuses on the steps they're taking to ensure that there isn't slavery or trafficking, particularly in their supply chain. So there really is typically a focus on procurement. However, councils such as Wandsworth obviously have a much wider and broader role in terms of detecting and being aware of providing services to those who may have suffered modern slavery or trafficking. And this statement really sets out what the council is currently doing and the objectives for the year ahead in its statement. So it sets out a series of objectives and proposes we'll put a working group together to monitor them objectives and come back to this committee annually in terms of our progress towards it.
Thank you, and I think we can all applaud all the work that has been done on that. I think we all agree on that. Councillor Senior?
As Mr Evans mentioned, this will come back to us annually. I think it's important it does. It's important we realise the breadth of this, because although, as he said, in many cases it was supply chain issue, there are other issues which we as a council are uniquely able to notice. It may be things we notice through adult care, and we're going into a home and discovering something that's not quite right. Or it may be something that we'll notice through our licensing procedure in the various premises that we license, and go in there and notice something that's wrong and needs dealing with. So I think this is not just a statement of ideas, it's also a statement of intent. We're actually going to do something when we come across these particular issues, and although I would hope they are rare, some of you will be aware of the dreadful incident in Southfields a few months ago. So sadly this does happen. So I think it's very important we have this statement, but we do something about it.
Colleagues, do we have any questions on this? Councillor Denfield.
Thank you. Small point at the top. There's quite a few typos still in the policy, but it talks about councils, plural, at a number of points, but I get the impression from the policy that this is purely for Wandsworth. Is that right?
My understanding is this has been
So
tailored
this
for...
will be on Wandsworth Council's website, and it'll be Wandsworth Council statement, yeah.
Purely.
So it's tailored.
Yeah, sure. So on a more substantive basis, so Councillor Senior was using the word notice quite a lot, which is quite a passive word. The best way to sort of tackle modern slavery is to do due diligence, which is an active way of investigating into your supply chains. And from this policy, it doesn't look like there's many resources, and I appreciate the council has very few resources at the moment, so that's not unexpected. So the resources are not really being applied to this policy, and it's simply down to if we happen to come across it, as Councillor Senior said.
I think that's slightly unfair. I mean, certainly on licensing, for example, the licensing officers will do regular reviews of premises, and they may notice either staff will be abused in a bar or in a nail establishment or something like that. All these establishments we give licences to, and they do get checked up, and likewise on some adult care and other issues. Of course, the problem with it is a very wide issue when things can occur. And of course, if it's in the home situation where the council has no other involvement, then frankly we can't visit every single home in the country to make sure there isn't a relative being abused in some way. But those issues where we are involved, it's part of staff training and role to look at it and to report back.
Yeah, I hope you take some comfort from that. I think it's a bit more than passive.
I do, but it's more the procurement where the supply chain is complex, and this is a hard job to delve into your supply chain, but the policy does talk in very general terms about sort of identifying and managing risks, and no much more detail than that on going deeper into the supply chain.
Mr. Mayor.
We're not buying t-shirts.
So we put in the goals section on page 29-30, we're doing work with our procurement team around this. But you're right, we don't do detailed audits of the supply chain. Don't have the resources to do detailed audits of the supply chain. The contractors are required as they are with things like health and safety and equalities and various other things, obviously to have their own policies on these things. We can go in and audit should we become aware of issues, and again that's a standard part of our contracts. But you're right, we don't have a team here to go out and audit lengthy supply chains.
Councillor Gibbons?
So we are relying in a sense on the suppliers to do the right thing. But you know, if for example we can't even monitor who pays the living wage and who doesn't, so we like need to be able to find out who is using subcontractors and other networks of procurement, which may at some point along the links have goods or services which have been sourced using people who are being pressed into this work.
I think, thankfully, this is a relatively small number. Perhaps you could expand a bit more. You know, a lot of work has obviously been done on training staff to look for all of this. Perhaps Mr. Mayor,
Well,
would
it's
like
beyond just the procurement staff. Actually, a lot of this then comes down to the client management of the contract as we run through. But as I've said already, it is an impossible task for us with the resources we've got to be able to track right the way through a supply chain, look for every kind of possible interaction. A number, of course, of our own suppliers will have their own requirements under this Act to meet the requirements of the Act themselves. So as I say, we are training staff to look at these, to make sure we've got all our policies right within that, and one would hope within that we will therefore be able to spot things we can spot through that process.
Councillor Richard Jones?
Yeah, just want to join the Chair's comments about how good a piece of work this is, and how useful actually this legislation is in compelling bodies to make statements like this, because I think, you know, more than anything it raises consciousness of the things we can spot. We have the opportunity to spot them, and often it's some training that is the difference between spotting and not spotting. When I was reading this paper, I was reminded that since 1998, under Section 6 of the Human Rights Act, local authorities have to ensure they act in compliance with the European Convention on Human Rights. And it occurred to me, have we ever thought about putting together a statement or a consolidated policy of how we ensure we are compliant with the Human Rights Act?
Mr. David?
The answer is
yes.
Yeah. I think that is the answer. We'll have to come back to the committee.
I think comments made that councillors, comments made this evening on something we agree that this is a good step forward. I think that this is something that we would like to keep an eye on. I hope that officers will share with us any incidences of this vile practices that come to light that show that maybe the system could be made more robust. And if you could look into the specific question about the European Human Rights Act, we would be very grateful. Colleagues, are we minded to agree to the recommendation too?
Agreed.
Oh no. So we can now move to agenda item number 6. Again, I don't think we need an introduction on this. I think we'll go straight into questions. Colleagues, do we have any questions on this one? Councillor Gibbons and Councillor Winkle.
Actually, I'll let Councillor Winkle lead off on this, and then I'll come in afterwards, if you're okay with that.
That's fine by me. So on this bridge paper, one of the recommendations is that obviously there's still 14 million to be found. This is the second bridge where we're waiting for private money, and should we really be having 2 proposals out there when we can't even build one bridge, let alone the second? So just in terms of finding, you know, I just think, should we not concentrate on one bridge at a time? And we all know that there's one bridge that's got support from both sides of the river, and we should be focusing on that maybe, and pausing this one now, not when we spent more money on it.
Miss Stewart. Or you can both have your say. I think the message was loud and clear, so.
Yes, so both bridges have funding allocations within the capital programme. The Cremorne Bridge is at a different stage. It has planning permission and a defined location. The work that we've been doing on the Pimlico Bridge is essentially to get it to the same stage of a defined project with a defined location, and then the option to take it forward through more detailed design work to planning. That's the decision.
I think it might be quite helpful to talk about the money and allocation of what we're talking about in this paper. Mr. Diamond, have you anything to add to that, perhaps?
Well, the only thing to say is that obviously the capital allocations from two different parts of SIL. This is a 9 elm SIL, and as Ms Stewart was saying, it's about getting it to the same level and the same level of definition.
But, sorry, can I just take one more thing?
Yeah, I mean, what I meant was, if you look at actually the paper, what we are actually agreeing to is not vast amounts of
in
commitment.
terms of that, yes, it's completing the process at the moment.
Completing phase 2, yes, no,
Yes,
I've read the paper, I completely understand. What I guess I'm saying is, given the fact that with the other bridge, because this is still going to need some private sponsorship at some point, if it's to go ahead following Tideway 2022, following the pause, it's still going to need some more money, 14 million. We're struggling to find some private sponsorship for first bridge, so why even spend a further £750,000 on this? Why not just pause it now? Why even bother getting it to the same stage when it is very, very difficult to be finding private sponsorship, as we know, in the current climate because of the other bridge? So I just wonder, why not pause it now? Why wait till you get it to the same stage? Why not just say, you know what, we don't need to do the rest of this work, it's not going to happen until 2022 anyway, at which point we might have to redo some of it. Why not just say pause now? That's my point.
Councillor Brian's got something to add on this.
You can correct me if what I say is wrong, but there is definitely an element of how cost is incurred, and I suppose I might use the term momentum of work. So you have advisors already working on this. We are continuing on for this piece of work here, which will be more cost efficient than just standing them down and then returning to it later.
Yes.
The timelines on these things are such that there is a judgment, which is in this paper, as to take it to a certain stage, rather than have a pause and then actually have to incur more money to have those advisors redo work to start again. I would re-emphasise
They can
that
consolidate with this proposal.
No, I
They
get
can
that.
consolidate the work they've done
I get
already.
that.
Separate.
Don't,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
completely get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, right, okay, so we'll have Councillor Richard Jones, Sally Gibbons.
I think Councillor Brennan has made my point that I think for those of us on the service side of these things, usually when clients say stop doing work and they come back a year later and say please pick up your pen, everyone has to remember what they were doing, have to read in again, and you find the cost spiral. So actually this phase is almost, I think, the consolidation of what's happened so far, and I think it's the most cost effective thing to do right now.
It's good to know. You get my point.
Councillor Sally.
So my question, I mean, it's two separate pieces of SIL, isn't it, funding, and also presumably the entities that would want to come in as a private sector developer for these bridges are separate entities. So I think it's quite hard to say either or. Like, how do you choose which project is better? And taking the point on, you know, we're kind of this far down the road, we might as well finish this phase and then park it. And I would agree with you on that. But I think, although they're both bridges, I don't think necessarily that they have that much more in common than, you know, the developers and the reason that they're there and who would be interested in having it there and funding it, etc., is all quite separate. Or no.
Councillor Brian, and then
I was
Councillor
just going to
Gibbons.
supplement and say you're absolutely right, and it's worth remembering, obviously, the role here of TfL and the mayor, and there is a river strategy with bridges identified, and we have a part to play in delivering on the bridges that are identified and we think would contribute to Wandsworth, and there are two bridges which we have to look at very separately, and then clearly TfL have a role and potentially funding available at some point. It would be wonderful if they were prepared to back both bridges. It would, I'm sure, make both feasible.
Councillor Gibbons, followed by
We
Councillor
seem to have a plethora of bridges at the moment on proposals, but actually it'd be nice to get one of them built, and the one that we should get built is the one that has all the support politically and a place to land. So I think actually the other element is that Westminster is simply not keen on this bridge at all. So really, in terms of getting something done, we should focus on the Cremorne Bridge, we should forget the Garden Bridge, we should park this one, and we should just focus, because if we try and focus on everything, we focus on nothing. And I think we just need to get one project done and dusted and finished.
Councillor Graham and then Councillor Boone.
Well, to some extent, I agree with Councillor Gibbons, but it also there's and why we're having two. There's no difference. There is a significant difference. Well, the Garden Bridge has nothing to do with us, thankfully.
Yeah. And I thought it had been carried.
There is a significant difference in that the Cremorne Bridge links to a transport hub. There is a purpose to residents in St Mary's Park. Having that bridge in place so that they can cross over and go to Imperial Wharf and use Imperial Wharf. So there's reason to cross on foot. At 9 Elms there's very little reason to cross on foot. So it's really about the convenience of cyclists rather than anything else, and it is less advanced. So I would agree that if we are going to, once we've got to the position of having paused this one, if we're going to prioritising the Cremorne Bridge, I think would be sensible.
Councillor Breen and then Councillor Denfield, and then I think we're just going to vote in it because we're split a bit on this.
Sure, I just wanted to highlight the point, and I suppose it picks up partly on Councillor Graham's comment that it's easy to forget the sheer scale and size of the regeneration project in 9 Elms and Battersea Power Station, and the sheer numbers of people who will live there and who will work there and who will need to get there. And the whole purpose of that funding being available is part of a wider spending on infrastructure to allow it to work for the benefit of Wandsworth and indeed the wider area, which Westminster will at some point realise will benefit them. And that includes sustainable transport to allow people by foot and by cycle to get to and from the site. The idea that the two existing bridges there, at Vauxhall and on the other side will be sufficient in the long term. That's why this project is there, because it will provide a service that will be needed when 9 Elms is fully up and running.
And Northern Line access.
That definitely needs to be borne in mind. And again, we are taking it forward to a stage here that will enable it to be delivered in the future. We are not today approving and signing off on funding for the entire thing.
So, Councillor Denfield, and then very quickly, Councillor Wintle.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask how you're going to get past the problem of Westminster's objection to the whole thing. They are united across parties on that, and Councillor Roy was saying they will eventually realise. Is that the strategy? Just wait for them to come to their senses?
No, I don't think it's a question of waiting. I think we're making a case for the bridge. We've had as you'll see here, there's a consultation process that's gone on, and there was a number, which I wouldn't say is actually a huge number, certainly from where the opposition originally was, who submitted into it. I think we'll work with Westminster going forward and at the time where this is taken forward. But clearly that's not something we're going to do now in this meeting. But equally, it's not a case of just waiting. But what it is, the point I was trying to make was not about the strategy for engaging Westminster, but really this will be also for the benefit of those who live on the other side of the river in the future.
Councillor Wintle, and then I think we're going to have to vote on this. We go around in circles.
So we know it can't start till 2022. There's a lot of still money there. As you said, huge infrastructure development, loads of pressure. Surely some of this money could be spent on other things within the local community. There's going to be a tube station. So surely this project and having it there and saying it's on pause, it's there, is that not surely just letting the property developers have increases in their house prices because there's going to be a bridge, rather than actually using this money for something that could be used in the local community?
No, because this funding is specifically for a large-scale infrastructure. There is separate funding.
I think we'll have to agree that that is your opinion. I think we've had a debate on it.
It's a procedural point that we vote on A, B and C separately from D.
Yeah, I was going to split those anyway, because I think that we have to look at what we're being asked to do. So the recommendations, we've got 2A. Are we agreed or not agreed on that one?
Against.
Against? Okay, so we'll go take 2A to a vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is lost. 2B? Against. Same numbers? You have with those?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify that 2B is about validation work, so they are looking at 2A being correct, so if you're against 2A, presumably you're for 2B though, because you want them to validate that. If you're voting down 2B, you're almost implicitly agreeing with 2A, but that's fine.
But then surely if you vote for 2,
No, that's
you
fine.
can't
Well,
vote for 2.
Councillor Gibbons, are you happy with the numbers?
I'm quite happy with the way we voted.
Right, you're happy with the way you voted? And then we have 2C, which I think is different, no further money is sought at this stage. Are we all in agreement that we want to vote against that?
We'll vote against C as well.
Yeah, you'll vote against C as well. Same numbers? Same numbers. And then we have 2D, so agree to pause the work programme.
We'll vote for that one.
You vote for that one. Okay, so we have 3 voted against but carried and 1 unanimously agreed. If we can then move on to item number 7, welfare reform update. We have an amendment on this one. Do you want to have a debate and then the amendment? How would you like to deal with this, Councillor Gibbons?
Should we? I think it'd be good to have discussion on the amendment, and then.
So you'd like to do your amendment first?
You happy with that?
Yeah. Who would like to propose the amendment? Councillor Denfield, who is seconding it? Councillor Gibbons. So we have the amendment before us, and colleagues, have we got anything that we would like to raise on this one? This is the item 7 amendment, which I think you've all had circulated to you, and I'd like to thank you that this was this afternoon, so thank you very much for that. Councillor Graham.
Yes, well, I wondered if officers could clarify some of the points that are made in the amendments, namely is there an expectation that we will run out of money in the DHP fund in this financial year? Is there an expectation that we will run out of money in the Wandsworth Discretionary Social Fund this year? And on the points made about the future years, ones that we accept, because they're making claims about what the council's view of these funds are and what the level of funding is that's available, and my understanding is these may not be correct.
Mr. Maidment.
So as the paper sets out, we expect to spend the resources available. We don't expect there to be an overspend on those resources. Indeed, we provided within the paper for any underspend on the social fund to be carried forward to next year. So those resources are all applied for the purposes that they've been set out. There is one update on the paper in that we've now got the DHP allocation for 2019-20. And I think Mr. Russell's got the exact figure. It's about 60,000 lower, I believe.
1,098,000.
1,098,000, so 56,000 or so lower than the current year's allocation on that, and we would expect again similarly to hit those figures for next year.
So my question would be to the opposition is, are they still going to continue with this amendment and it's stating as facts things that are not correct?
Councillor Denfield, then Councillor Gibbons.
Very happy to amend the wording to say the council may run out of money in its DHP fund before the end of the year and may run out of the discretionary fund. I think the key points from our perspective are the requests for additional funding in case there is an overspend demand on these 2 funds. So happy to tweak the wording in I and IB.
Councillor Gibbons.
I was just going to say that Councillor Grimston, who was formerly a member of the Tory group, always used to, whenever you challenge him on anything, would say the most difficult thing to predict is the future. And things may appear to be going very swimmingly at the moment and we're going to meet those targets, but you cannot absolutely 100% say that we are not going to be in a situation where there isn't an increase in demand for these services, particularly with the economy going the way it is. So I think it's a sensible precautionary move to make sure that we have enough headroom for an increase in the amount that we may have to give out to people.
Well,
It's not about anything.
I think in that case I'd like to move an amendment
Yes.
Please,
of
councillors, can we be quiet?
my own that we seek emergency funding from the government on the grounds that it may be the case that an aircraft lands on this building and we have to rebuild it.
Exactly.
It may be.
Would you like me to second that, Councillor?
I'll help
I
with the
think
letter.
that we, councillors,
Might as well
I
make a joke
think
about
that
it.
we are all minded on this side that we believe that the facts speak for themselves and that there is no pressure on the budget, so therefore we will not vote for it. So we will put this to a vote. All those in favour of the amendment?
So did this come out of
And
the
all
sky?
those
Where
against
did
the
that
amendment?
come from? Bizarre.
The amendment is
Totally
not
bizarre.
one. So if we can now
Based on anything.
proceed, please, to the main paper. Again, colleagues, I think that this is fairly straightforward, so if we can go straight, councillors, if we can please go straight into questions. Colleagues, do we have questions? No. Then if we can proceed to the recommendations 2A and B, would we like to go to a vote on that?
Yeah, can we just split that, please?
Okay, so we have 2A,
We'd be against that, and then 4B and C.
Where's C?
There's no C.
Sorry, C.
A and B.
Yeah.
So we are against 2A. We might as well do a vote, so for the purpose of the lot, those for 2A, those against 2A. You're going to abstain, Councillor Denford? No, you're happy in. You're happy in. So that is, so we've noted those, and then we all agree unanimously on 2B. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct, agreed. So if we can now proceed to Treasury policy, which again is as it is. Do I have any questions? Councillor Sallier.
Thank you. My question, it relates to page 61 about the IFRS 9. And my question is essentially, do we know if we'll have managed to reverse out of anything that would sort of accrue an additional liability within the 5-year period? And if we don't know, do we have an estimate of what problem, how much it will cost us and what we're going to do about it? Sorry.
So no and no, because until we get there, we
don't know.
won't know. As we will be monitoring it carefully, obviously, as we go through and taking action. Part of this policy is all about managing the risk as we go through. What IFRS 9 requires is that the market value of the underlying instruments effectively hit your council tax or hit your revenue budget for the year, whereas at the moment we can simply hold them in a reserve outside. So we're looking over the 5 years about how we manage that. Do we build up a reserve to manage against that, etc., etc. So we'll be doing our best to make sure there's not a major impact.
Okay, thank you.
Can I perhaps add to that? I mean, I think too often there's quite a lot of misunderstanding that these are all a magic money tree, and that simply isn't the case, is it, Mr. Maitland? Perhaps you can shut that one down. You can shake it and it will be there.
Sadly, I think the figures in the report would actually demonstrate that. The counter to that is that the sort of investments that are being talked about are long-term investments, so actually it's very difficult to judge on a year-by-year basis. What it means is you have to have the security of funds, as you do in a pension fund, to invest over a very long period to ride out that volatility. And what IFRS 9 introduces is a possibility that you have to live with that volatility in year, and unless your reserves are significant enough, and that could be for more than a year, it could be for 5 years, so unless your reserves are significant enough to deal with that, then you could have a problem clearly on that.
Do you think that local government would get an extension again and just continue to push it out, given the nature of how we have to manage and hold property and cash?
Sorry,
do you think we would? Do you think central government is likely to extend? Oh, sorry. Do you think central government's likely to extend that 5-year period for local government, given the issues with something like that?
No, I think it's
No.
actually highly unlikely. There's been quite a fight to get them to a point where they would have a transition period on there. For those who've read a lot of the press, much of this is about a small number of councils who've taken very, very significant stances in in areas of property and effectively property development around that, and the government's become quite worried about that and therefore is seeking a way to clamp down in effect on that.
Thank you very much.
Which is obviously very prudent.
It is.
Colleagues, any other questions on this?
Just a point. I mean, I think it is important that we make sure that we absolutely maximise the returns on our investments. And you know, the council hasn't been great at doing this, and we think there is more to be got with this.
I hear what the councillor says, and we've heard this, of course, before. I'm in regular discussions with the Director of Resources, as he well knows, on this point. If you look at the areas in which we've invested, I think we have done what we can to try to increase our returns without undertaking unnecessary risks. And I'm sure you will be interested to know that only last week, Mr Maidman's approached me. He said it had an approach from Northamptonshire County Council, which was offering us 20 basis points worth of market norm. And did I think it was wise? Well, I think you can cover what my response to that was, which is definitely no, as he was already advising. But you know, there may be other things that you know, we are welcome to look at, but I would refer all councils to the fact that some of the investments we've had have suffered a minor capital hit. And although I guess that's now been restored, and view of the recent increase in the stock market, it does only go to show that you have to be careful about what you do with these things.
Just to add to that, I think that if we looked at perhaps some of the safer longer term investments, that would be the area to look.
Councillor Sallier? Councillor Sallier?
Sorry, just I was going to raise it actually under capital management, but sort of reading through both the Treasury and that paper, I mean, we spend a lot of time looking at security and liquidity as our primary focus rather than yield, and I think that's the right thing for the public sector to do. We're not an investment fund. We're not, you know, we can't sort of squander cash. And I'm curious, it is something we hear from the opposition an awful lot, that you would get greater returns. I just wondered if you had any specific ideas rather than just the idea that there's something better out there.
Well,
and then secondly, my question to the officers is, presumably you don't just go through a list and sort of dot your finger on things to invest in. Presumably there's some process involved in that. And I wondered if perhaps you could help the opposition understand the process that you go through, so that they could understand that, you know, it's not that... I'm assuming you're not deliberately either choosing blindly or choosing things that aren't maximising our income. I mean...
So Councillor Gibbons, I think, fair question, and we all want better returns, so we'd love to know where it's coming from.
Hang on, we're not in the business of giving financial tips, really. You know, that's not where we are.
But you're constantly... But it's the cornerstone of your policy.
You know, this is why, you know, we would, you know, I think on both sides, we set the general idea of what we want to do, and then we hand it over to professional fund managers who actually go and do it.
I think that's what you've done, though, surely, isn't it?
You know, let's put some money on this stock, or you know, let's go down the betting shop and put the money on this horse. We actually get people who know what we're doing to do that. But the wider point is you know, that if we looked at some of the different long-term investments, we could at least keep up with inflation. Which is what we are not doing at the moment. Our investments are not keeping up with inflation.
But I still don't understand which of these long-term investments what are they? You must have looked at it. To be able to say that categorically, that that's what you're going to do, you must have something in mind. And also, again, just to come back, and I'll let Mr Maidman answer, I'm assuming we also take professional advice, that either we have someone qualified, this idea that Councillor Gibbons has that we might want to take professional advice surely is not a new one.
I certainly hope it isn't a new one.
Well, let's ask Mr Maidman. Perhaps can you leave it? Councillor Saleh, can you turn your mic on?
Come to the
tempted to
mic.
say you wouldn't take unprofessional advice, I guess, around that. So we do have them within the policy, it's embedded that we'll have external advisors look through, and we did last year have them go right the way through the policy as part of putting, as is referred to in the paper, 50 million into various investments across that. We will I meet with our Treasury team every month to go through what's available in the market, where we might look differently for it. We're also part of benchmarking clubs information sharing to look at what is being done generally in the market and what other opportunities there may be in there. So yes, we will look across the piece and we will take appropriate advice clearly around those issues. The thing you will always find in this, and you're right, we are in effect required by statute to look at security, liquidity and then yield on this. To get a high return you take higher risk, and that usually involves longer term investment as well. What we try and do is build a spread of our investments so that we have some. So if you look at it at the moment, we have 75 million on longer term investments, things which actually would be quite difficult for us to trade out of quite quickly, and it wouldn't be good for us to trade out at the wrong period of time. We will then spread other investments across periods generally of up to 2 years in what you'd call very secure investments in either the banks that we're allowed to within our policy, other local authorities, that kind of thing.
Councillor Graham.
Well, I mean, I am astonished by the opposition's approach to this, but Councillor Gibbons did say something highly revealing, which I wonder if we could have minuted, namely that we don't do these things ourselves, we get someone who knows what they're doing, which it might not be nice if we got them to come to the committee for you.
We set the parameters. We set the general parameter and the direction which we want to go in.
I'm sorry.
Right, I think.
I'm sorry.
But I think that's just
I'm
generally.
sick of, come on, both Councillor Say and Councillor Graham are patronising us. You don't professionally manage the assets on your side either. What you do is take decisions and guide officers to invest the money for you, which is exactly what we would do. As Mr.
Only your way gets more money.
As Mr. Maiden just said, it's perfectly possible to generate a high return by taking slightly more risk and investing in longer dated assets.
Residents' money.
Not losing residents' money.
Councillors,
What reserves do you have at Richmond Council?
Councillors, I think we
What
have.
reserves are there at Richmond Council?
Councillors, I think we have had a decent discussion on this.
What reserves do we have at Richmond Council?
What we all agree is that we would. Don't shout at me. What we all agree is that we would like a greater degree of return. And if you have got some cast iron suggestions, it is not impolite or patronising to ask you for them. So let us all work collectively together. We have sent a message collectively, loud and clear, to Mr. Maidment to keep asking the experts for their opinion. End of. Now, can we please proceed to recommendations in paragraph 2? We've got A, B and C. Are we minded to agree them, or would you like to vote separately on them?
We would like to vote separately indeed.
So which ones?
We will vote,
all of them?
We will vote against A.
Okay, let's do our numbers. Those in favour of A.
Sorry. But we're going the other way round.
Those against. So, right, then we move to B.
B and C we're in favour.
So you will agree?
Yes.
Agreed. Right, marvellous, unanimous. So, if we can now move on to item number 9, capital strategy. Then we are as we are, so I will go straight into questions. Questions on this paper? No questions. So the recommendations, this is just basically for interest. Are we happy? Yeah, we're approving the council capital strategy. Are we agreed on this?
Agreed.
Agreed. Then we can proceed to number 10, council tax setting report, which is as it is. we've all had a chance to look at this. So again, going into questions. Do I have any questions? Ooh, no questions, colleagues?
Well, just, I don't have a question, but just, I'm sure that from the debate we had at the last council meeting, which is a little bit unusual, we don't often debate the council tax at that meeting, but as it was available to us, it inevitably came into the discussion. I'm sure you're aware of our position on this.
And you promised that you would give us a costed budget.
No, you asked for a costed budget, and you explained that when your councillors in Lambeth put forward a costed budget, there was only one of them left. To be honest, once we're in charge of the council, you'll see our budget. Once we're in charge of the council, you will see our budget, and then you can criticise.
Right, colleagues, let's get back to the things we have in hand. So page 94, 2, we have A, B, C, D and E. How are we deemed? Are we going to have a vote on this?
We would support E, but we're against the others.
Should we just do the same numbers? Are we happy with that?
Agreed?
So A, B, C, D, you don't agree, we agree, E, everybody agrees. Marvellous. So then we have got item number 11, the Wandsworth Trading Company. I'm not sure that's going to be terribly controversial, but
Agreed.
Agreed. Oh. And the last item is on page 125, which is procurement programme. Now I do actually have a question on this.
We have a standard amendment.
Oh yes, sorry.
Yeah, the standard amendment's
Sorry.
going to get the standard
Sorry,
response.
we have an amendment on that, which I think colleagues have all
There's also a
seen.
revised paper came round.
Yes.
You need to be aware of that.
Right, okay, so has everybody seen the revised paper? I've only just seen it.
Could we just have a quick explanation of what the implication of the revision is?
Yes, I agree with you.
It's only that it should have been clear in the original paper that 3 of the contracts were concession contracts, so they were things on which we, in effect, the bids come in for how much money people will give us to run those contracts rather than the other way round.
Which is what's been tried.
Yes.
So I picked up on it.
Before we do the amendment, can I ask a quick question, or Councillor Gibbons? No? On the proposals, as you all know, I have very strong views about procurement, and I'm quite happy to devolve this, I have no problem with that. But I would like reassurance that each and every one of these procurement exercises is properly challenged, rather than just being given the nod.
So each of them have to come through the procurement board, which the chief executive normally chairs. I sit on. Mr. Giuliotti is also on there, and the head of procurement. So they go through quite a rigorous process. It's not something that most of the officers enjoy coming to, I think it's fair to say.
Okay, but as I said, I do want comfort that it is challenged, not necessarily every time, but that the status quo is not always just waved through. That's
Some of my colleagues behind me have just agreed that they don't enjoy going to the meeting.
wonderful. So if we can now proceed to the amendment. Do colleagues, Councillor Gray.
Well, we've had in the past proposals from the Labour Party that there should be an option to submit a bid that complies with London Living Wage. Then we had at the last one full council suggestion that it should be a stipulation that every bid should comply with the London Living Wage. And we now have something that appears to be neither one nor the other. What
We're just trying to get something past you.
Now, we're not shouting. No shouting.
We have to know what we're voting on. What will be requested be? Does that mean that it's a requirement that one has to submit 2 bids? Or is it merely that they're encouraged, asked to submit 2 bids? How will that be assessed? What are the criteria?
Councillor Denfield, yes, now if we can be tidy about this, it's been a good meeting so far, so let's just continue.
Seconds out. Tidy.
The concept of variant bids is that it's an option. It's always an option. You can't compel someone to submit something that they commercially don't want to do, but you can set your own rules. So you can set the rules of bid 1, which is free for all, do what you like, and you can set the rules of bid 2, which is must pay the London Living Wage to the relevant employees, and then bidders are given the option to submit one for bid 1 and one for bid 2, or one for just one or the other, or not participate at all. It's a very, very standard procurement process. It's very common in construction contracts, actually, where these big projects are complicated, and sometimes the contractor has a better idea of how it could be done than the council, so they suggest a different programme, a different way of doing things that maybe is cheaper or quicker, and it's pretty standard.
So can I take it from this that Councillor Dempsey was saying he would not automatically accept a bid that was compliant with the London Living Wage?
You're not allowed to automatically accept any bid. You have to evaluate them all in accordance with the criteria that you set out.
Yes, but given his criteria would not include necessarily adopting a bid with the London Living Wage.
You couldn't artificially engineer it so that your London Living Wage bids got higher scores, because that would be narrowing competition, and transparency requirements would mandate that you don't do that.
Well, in which case, why did you vote for something else at the last full council that contradicts that completely?
Yes.
Colleagues, I think we have had this debate on a number of occasions, and I propose that we put this to the vote now rather than ping-pong all evening. Are we in agreement with that?
I think we should move to the vote.
Yes. So who is this proposed by?
Me.
Councillor Gibbons, seconded by Councillor Denfield. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against the amendment? The amendment is lost. So if we can go back to the procurement paper, page 126, the recommendations in 2, which are A and B, are we voting?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. There endeth.
8:41.
No, we're still in another meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Y'all ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I don't think you get the life back just yet.
Who's not in? No, you're not.
Are you not on GP? No, it's a shame.
What are you going to do?
No.
I'll see you later.
See you later.
Deputy Chair.
No harm in taking the glory seat.
Musical chair.
No harm taking
Right. Okay, everybody. There are apologies from Councillor Dawson. Do we have any other apologies? Doesn't look like it. Okay, very good. Unlike the briefing, because we do now have minutes for general purposes, so are there any issues, or can we approve those as a correct record?
Agreed.
Good. Before we move on to the one item on our paper, obviously there was an incident last week at the Education Committee in which one of the officers, the committee went on very late, and gone midnight, one of the officers unfortunately collapsed. We do understand that Ms. Harris is now recovering, and I'm sure that we all wish to send our best wishes to her. As a result of that meeting, and both things that happened earlier in that meeting and obviously that incident which resulted in it being abandoned, concerns have been expressed about whether we have the correct procedures, the correct rules in place to manage business at overviewing scrutiny committees. Now, I don't propose that we discuss this tonight, but I thought it was right to say that the leader and others have said that they wish to look at these procedures. At that stage, once there are actually some proposals to look at, which may also include some discussion with the opposition, as often happens on these matters, it would come back to a future General Purposes Committee to approve those measures. And so I think it is right to suggest now that people are aware that that may be happening, and if necessary, we may wish to call a special meeting before we get to the June cycle of OSCs, so that we could have those procedures, if agreed, in place for the next round. So that's all I wanted to say on that. If that's acceptable, we can move on.
Yep, just the same, you know, we're very much up for a bipartisan discussion on this.
Thank you. Right, so we move on to item 3, which is the Public Health Delegations paper. I think it's probably worth saying up front on this that we are not being asked to agree the actual organisational changes here, which are a delegated matter to officers. All we're being asked to do is tidy up constitutional loose ends that those changes create. Mr. Evans, wish to add anything to that?
No, it's absolutely correct. So the paper is just seeking a committed agreement to the changes to the scheme of delegation, which is required as a result of the changes, the management changes which are happening, to make sure that correct authorities are in place. So the scheme of delegation is part of the council's constitution, and therefore it comes to GP for its approval before going there.
Councillor Gibbons.
I have been, some colleagues of mine have been in contact with me who have a very deep and assiduous concern about this matter, hence the amendment that we put forward. Their concern, I think, from what I understand, is that they felt it would be a good matter of good protocol that the Health and Wellbeing Board at least had sight of this document, and I think it would be helpful if there was some reassurance that this was going to be run past them and their views might be considered.
Well, I think in terms of views being considered, this is an organisational change that is already happening under officers' delegated powers. But I think it's entirely fair to suggest that they should be aware of it. And would it be possible for us to send the report to them for information?
I mean, certainly, yes. I mean, just to reassure the committee chairman, of course, we work very closely with the CCG as one of the primary partners in the Health and Wellbeing Board. So, you know, they would be fully involved in these discussions in any event. The changes don't affect the political oversight of public health, of course. That stays unchanged. And this really is to do with succession planning arrangements in truth. And that's what's underneath the proposals. Councillor Critchard did sort of reach out to me to express interest and concern about the proposals. I met with her a few weeks ago. We spent an hour together, and at the end, she said she was persuaded and content with the proposals. So it's definitely good practice to talk with our health partners about the changes, but I think that they will command sort of general support from councillors.
Councillor.
I do agree with your comments as well, Gant, that having it go to the Health and Wellbeing Board is not necessarily a problem. The issue I have with that is that the Health and Wellbeing Board isn't actually an oversight committee anyway. If that makes sense, I don't mind it. I don't have a problem, but I don't necessarily see what relevance it would have to it. I would see it could equally go to the Adult Care Committee. That would be fine. Bearing in mind that's in June, I'm aware, as an information piece, but I fail to see where it might necessarily be valuable. But I don't mind it. I don't necessarily have an opposition to it.
So just addressing myself to the amendment. Mrs. Al-Sharifi retires at the end of March. Therefore, the new arrangements need to be put in place immediately after then. There's been a very full staff consultation, and the widespread expectation of the people concerned and their support. Obviously we have their support. Is the changes will take effect from the 1st of April. So, I'm concerned that the committee shouldn't give any kind of uncertain message to colleagues who are expecting this change.
I mean, I think the other point to note is that it's not for the Health and Wellbeing Board to propose or approve changes to the Constitution, and that's what we're actually looking at here. It's not the organisation itself. Are there any other points, any other questions you want to raise? Okay, well, are you still intending to move your amendment in these circumstances?
I'll explain to my colleagues. That we've got an assurance that the Health and Wellbeing Board will have sight of this and an opportunity to express a view or an opinion on it. And I think in the light of that assurance, we can withdraw.
I think we're all appreciative of that, so thank you. In that case, does the committee agree the recommendations of paragraph 1?
Agreed.
Marvellous, that concludes the meeting.